Horror is powerful when it leaves scars on your memory, when a single scene can haunt you forever. But some stories never knew when to stop. Great classics earned their place in history, only for sequels to stumble in with louder kills, weaker ideas, and none of the terror that made the originals unforgettable. These are the films that tried to keep the fear alive, but ended up burying it instead. Let's break down the worst horror sequels ever made. The original Carrie worked because it understood pain. Carrie White was fragile, awkward, and easy to laugh at. But the movie treated her like a real person. That's why her breakdown at prom felt so brutal. We saw every insult and every cruel act stack up until she snapped. The horror wasn't just blood or powers. It was watching a girl pushed past her limit. Now compare that with Carrie 2. Rachel is the new telekinetic teen, but she doesn't get the same weight. The movie spends too much time acting like a 90s teen drama, with grunge music, tired clicks, and MTV-style editing. Instead of building dread, it just throws cliché scenes at the audience. Carrie's world in the first film was quiet and crushing. Rachel's world looks like a bad episode of Dawson's Creek, with random horror sprinkled in. The prom in Carrie is one of the most famous horror finales ever. Shocking, sad, and unstoppable. When Carrie snapped, it felt like a natural, terrifying end to her story. In Carrie 2, the big party massacre feels shallow. Yes, the violence is there, but there's no real tension or heartbreak. It's gore without meaning. Amy Irving returning as Sue Snell should have tied the stories together, but instead it shows how weak the new one is. Sue was haunted in the first film, a survivor who carried guilt. In the sequel, she just feels wasted. Carrie ended with a gut punch. Carrie 2 drags the story back for no reason, like opening a book that was already closed. The first Hellraiser was disturbing in the best way. It wasn't just about demons. It was about human desire and obsession. Frank's resurrection, Julia's cold willingness to kill for him, and the Cenobites showing up like angels of punishment gave the film style and weight. Pinhead, played by Doug Bradley, was terrifying because he barely needed to move or raise his voice. His presence carried fear. Revelations is the opposite. Made fast and cheap, it looks like a knockoff version of the original. The new Pinhead is the biggest problem. Instead of cold menace, you get a stiff performance that looks like a bad Halloween mask. When he speaks, the lines sound flat, and all the threat is gone. The first movie built up tension with every scene. Frank's body slowly rebuilding, Julia luring victims, the puzzle box twisting lives apart. Revelations skips all of that patience. It throws blood at the screen, forces in family drama, and calls it horror. There's no atmosphere, no artistry, no dread. It's just noise. When Hellraiser first came out, it felt dangerous, like you were seeing something you shouldn't. Revelations feels like a right-saving cash grab, made only so the studio wouldn't lose control of the franchise. Fans of the original films, even those who defend the weirder sequels, usually pretend this one doesn't exist. That says everything. The Exorcist shocked audiences because it felt real. Friedkin shot it like a slow nightmare. Doctors running endless tests, priests fighting doubt, and Regan suffering in ways no child should. The terror was grounded. When Regan finally levitated, when her voice changed, when her head spun, it all hit harder because everything before looked like normal life breaking apart. Then came The Heretic. Instead of sticking with that grounded horror, it throws the story into dream states, hypnosis machines, and endless lectures about good and evil. Richard Burton's priest spends more time explaining than acting, and Linda Blair's Regan doesn't feel haunted anymore. She just floats through the story. The first film used silence and shadows to create fear. The sequel fills the screen with glowing lights, locust swarms, and strange visions that look silly instead of scary. The famous possession in a bedroom setting that made the original claustrophobic is gone. Now the story jumps around the world, chasing ideas instead of fear. The difference is night and day. The Exorcist made the impossible feel real. The Heretic makes the terrifying feel fake. Viewers who wanted chills got confusion instead. To this day, it's one of the clearest examples of how a sequel can misunderstand its own foundation. The first Omen didn't need much to scare people. Damien was a child who seemed ordinary. But little by little the truth came out. Accidents, deaths, and signs pointing to something darker. The tension came from adults realizing the boy was not just a child, but the Antichrist himself. Gregory Peck anchored the story with quiet strength, and Jerry Goldsmith's score turned every scene into something sinister. Omen IV has none of that. Made for TV, it feels small and flat. The new child, Delia, doesn't have the eerie weight Damien carried. The movie repeats the formula. Strange deaths, worried parents, a priest warning about evil. But it never builds suspense. The scares are predictable, and the story drags. The original film had style. That slow build, those shocking deaths, and Peck's serious performance gave it a sense of importance. The Awakening feels like background filler, with weak performances and no atmosphere. Even the music is forgettable. Instead of adding to the story, it just recycles it with less money and less heart. Compared to the first film, which was classy and terrifying, Omen IV looks like an imitation. Fans usually don't even count it when talking about the series because it doesn't carry the same DNA. It's the kind of sequel you forget the moment it ends. The first Leprechaun was never high art, but at least it had balance. Warwick Davis played the role with menace, and the movie kept one foot in actual horror while sneaking in dark humor. The small-town setting gave the Leprechaun a creepy edge, and the deaths had some tension. By the third movie, that balance was gone. Leprechaun 3 sets the killer in Las Vegas, and the film turns into a comedy routine. Instead of a monster you fear, Davis becomes a walking joke machine. Every kill is followed by a pun. Every scare is undercut by campy humor. The first film at least tried to create suspense around the creature's hunt for gold. In Vegas, the story is just an excuse for neon lights and goofy setups. The effects are cheap, the sets look fake, and the whole thing feels like parody. The Leprechaun has gone from a horror villain to a cartoon. Compared to the slightly eerie atmosphere of the first movie, this one doesn't even try. It's not scary, it's not suspenseful, and it doesn't feel like horror anymore. Fans might laugh at it, but not because it's clever. Because it's so over the top, it stops being horror at all. The first Alien was tight and terrifying. A small crew, one creature, and nowhere to hide. Aliens raised the stakes with more monsters and more action. But it worked because the Marines felt real, and Ripley's fight had meaning. Even Alien 3, with all its flaws, carried an emotional punch with Ripley's sacrifice. Resurrection brings her back, but not in a way that feels right. She's cloned, mixed with alien DNA, and written as a strange new version of the character. Sigourney Weaver plays her with confidence, but it doesn't feel like the Ripley fans knew. Instead of a human survivor fighting against the impossible, we get a character who is part alien herself. The scares shift from shadows and suspense to odd experiments and slimy hybrids. The infamous newborn monster at the end is supposed to disturb, but the design looks awkward and never lands the fear. The earlier films used tension and silence. This one fills the screen with noise and CGI that hasn't aged well. Compared to the sharp control of Ridley Scott and James Cameron, Resurrection looks messy. The tone flips between horror, comedy, and action, and the result doesn't satisfy any of them. The Alien series once felt sleek and dangerous. By this point, it was drifting without purpose. Chucky worked best when the story kept Andy young and vulnerable. In the first film, nobody believed a child who swore his doll was alive. That disbelief built suspense, and the doll became scarier the longer it stayed hidden. The second film added more creative kills, but kept the focus on Chucky's obsession with Andy. The third film skips too far ahead. Andy is now a teenager at a military school, and the story loses what made the earlier movies creepy. Watching a small child stalked by a doll is unsettling. Watching a teenager face the same thing feels less tense. The imbalance is gone. The setting could have worked. Strict rules, drills, and authority figures who refuse to listen. But the movie never uses it well. Most of the characters are thin, and the pacing drags. The kills are bigger, but not scarier. It becomes routine instead of shocking. Chucky's wisecracks are still there, but without a strong story around him, he feels like a parody of himself. By the third entry, the series had lost the freshness that made the first two films stand out. What was once strange and daring now feels predictable. Carpenter's Halloween worked because it was simple. Michael Myers was an unstoppable figure who could appear in any shadow. Laurie Strode was an ordinary babysitter forced to survive. The suspense came from what wasn't shown as much as what was. By the time Resurrection arrived, the formula had been stretched thin. The film tries a new angle with a reality show inside the Myers house. Contestants wander the halls with cameras strapped to them, while Michael lurks nearby. Instead of building dread, the setup makes the story look gimmicky. Laurie Strode is written out quickly in the opening, and her exit feels hollow compared to her clever fight for survival in the original. Without her, the focus shifts to a new cast that never connects with the audience. Michael himself becomes more of a background presence, stepping in for quick kills without suspense leading up to them. The first film created fear with silence, shadows, and patience. This one trades those strengths for loud dialogue, cheap stunts, and an ending that lands without impact. The difference shows how far the character of Michael Myers had been diluted by overuse. When Alfred Hitchcock released Psycho in 1960, it didn't just scare audiences. It rewrote the rules of horror. The film shocked viewers with its daring mid-story murder of Marion Crane, its clever use of silence and editing, and the final reveal that Norman Bates had been living a double life as both himself and his mother. Anthony Perkins' chilling performance and Hitchcock's masterful suspense turned the movie into a classic that defined psychological horror for decades. The closing image of Norman's eerie smile became one of the most unsettling final shots in film history, leaving no need for more. More than 20 years later, Psycho II arrived. Anthony Perkins returned as Norman Bates, now released from a mental institution and trying to start fresh. The movie plays with the question of whether Norman is truly cured or if his dark side is waiting to take over again. That idea could be strong, but it doesn't have the same shock as the first film. In Hitchcock's original, audiences uncovered Norman's secret at the same time the story unfolded. By the time the sequel begins, everyone already knows who he really is, so the surprise is gone. The sequel adds bloodier murders and a simpler storyline, but it misses the style and elegance of Hitchcock's direction. Psycho scared people with silence, tension, and clever editing. Psycho 2 explains too much and stretches out twists that don't land as hard. Perkins is still excellent as Norman, giving him both a soft, troubled side and a frightening edge. But instead of feeling like a masterful psychological thriller, the sequel feels more like a typical slasher movie from the 1980s. It isn't a terrible film, yet compared to the genius of the first Psycho, it falls short and can't capture the same magic. Jaws remains one of the greatest thrillers ever made. Spielberg turned a simple shark story into pure tension, with long stretches of dread and a monster that stayed hidden until the right moment. The characters mattered, the setting mattered, and the fear felt real. The fourth film ignores all of that. In Jaws, the shark is no longer just an animal. It somehow seeks revenge on the Brody family, tracking them across the ocean to the Bahamas. The idea is so far-fetched, it strips away the original's realism. Instead of careful suspense, the movie throws the shark on screen over and over. The effects are clunky, and the attacks lack the power of the original. The first film built dread because the shark barely appeared. Here it's shown too often, and each scene looks staged. The human characters don't help. Without strong leads like Roy Scheider's Chief Brody, the drama feels hollow. Even Michael Caine, who joined the cast, couldn't save it from weak writing. The original film balanced character and terror. This sequel feels like a parody of itself. Jaws made people fear the water. The Revenge made people laugh at how far the series had sunk. And there you have it, the horror sequels that should have stayed buried in their graves. Whether it was lazy writing, bizarre plot twists, or a total betrayal of the original's spirit, these films remind us that not every franchise needs a follow-up. If you enjoyed exploring the darker corner of the cinema with us, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow horror fans, and subscribe to the channel for more creepy countdowns and movie breakdowns.